So without further ado, I think I'm going to just pass the floor to Professor Adorno, the title of whose talk is Relevance of the UNESCO Recommendation on Science and Scientific Researchers for Addressing Issues Concerning Research Integrity. Please, Roberto.
Well, thank you, Helle. I'll try not to share my PowerPoint. Can you see it? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, as Helle just said, the new UNESCO recommendation is a very rich document that can be analyzed from very different perspectives: the role of science in society, the freedom of science, the rights and responsibilities of scientists, etc. I will focus on a very particular issue, which is research integrity and its role in this document. And I will point out the, the great relevance of this topic in this new recommendation if compared to the previous version of 1974. But before entering into this, I'd like to say a few words about what I'm talking about, what is research integrity. There are many definitions, but I take this one from the US Office of Research Integrity, which defines this concept as the active adherence to the ethical principles and professional standards for the responsible practice of research. It adds also that by ethical principles, it is meant honesty, the golden rule, trustworthiness, and high regard for the scientific record. Then the US National Academy of Sciences offers a more concrete guidance to this concept when it provides a list of practices that characterize research integrity, which are honesty and fairness in proposing, performing, and reporting research, accuracy and fairness in representing contributions to research proposals and reports, proficiency and fairness in peer review, collegiality in scientific interactions, communications, and sharing of resources, disclosure of conflicts of interest, protection of human subjects in the conduct of research, humane care of animals in the conduct of research, and adherence to the mutual responsibilities of mentors and trainees. So these are basically the main practices that embody that characterize the notion of research integrity. But maybe this not enough. I think to better understand the concept, it's very helpful to consider what is contrary to research integrity, because as we all know, evil is always easier to recognize than goodness. So taking this negative approach is also helpful to understand this concept. What is contrary to scientific integrity? Scientific misconduct, so it's called. And there is a classic definition of scientific misconduct, the so-called FFE definition, that defines misconduct in science as fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, or other practices that seriously deviate from those that are commonly accepted within the scientific community for proposing, conducting, or reporting research. Well, this was just to say in a few words what I'm talking about. Now, the question is scientific integrity relevant, important in the new recommendation, the 2017 recommendation? And my answer is yes. In contrast to the previous document, the new recommendation gives a very central role to issues of research integrity. In the 1974 recommendation, these issues were, I would say, absent, almost absolutely absent. And this is not surprising because the discussion on research integrity started only in the 1980s or so. Before that, there were no guidelines at all on scientific integrity. There were no procedures for dealing with allegations of misconduct. There was like a naive view that scientists could self-regulate their activities. There was no need for any procedures for dealing with potential misconduct. So it was impossible to imagine that scientists could intentionally, for instance, manipulate the data because they were searching for the truth. But, well, times have changed. We know that scientists are human beings and are able to do this misconduct, to manipulate data, to deceive the scientific community. They are exposed to commercial interest, etc. I would also like to say that the previous recommendation had rather narrow focus, this also visible in the title itself, which is about the status of science and scientific researchers. The new recommendation is not about the status, it's about science and scientific scientists. So I have the impression that the previous document was aimed more at protecting scientists' rights and freedoms as employees, as workers. The perspective was rather narrow. There was very little or almost nothing about scientists' responsibilities in the conduct of research, and especially concerning the ethical aspects of their work. This has changed with the new document. This is even visible in the definition itself of science in the new document, which it takes up the old definition, but it adds the need of peer review as an element of science. So it's like a constitutive element of scientific research that these scientific studies, are subject to peer review, to assessment by independent peers, colleagues. So the new recommendation has clearly a much broader approach, a more, I would say, almost philosophical or political approach, as Yvonne said yesterday. Just the idea that science is presented as a common good shows this broader perspective, which this is new. This was not in the previous document. So there is, taking this into account, it's not surprising that the document gives puts a much stronger emphasis on issues related to scientific integrity, to ethics in science. There are specific many references to the ethical behavior of scientists, to peer review, which is mentioned 4 times in the document, to the need of ethical review of research proposals, to the need to avoid undisclosed conflicts of interest, on the importance of teaching research integrity to science students, etc. So I think all of this is like one of the major innovations in this new recommendation. And this is also very revealing of the importance that we attach today to research integrity issues. I would like to say a few words about education of scientific researchers, which also has significant role in this document. The old recommendation included a section on education, section 3, but it was really very short. The topic was almost mentioned, so in passing, it was not very relevant. The new document expands significantly this section 3 on education and incorporates issues relevant to integrity. I will mention 3 articles. One is Article 12, which refers to the need that this education gives or emphasizes effective scientific research goals for scientific researchers of integrity and intellectual maturity, combining high intellectual qualities and respect for ethical principles. So the last reference to ethical principles is new in the document. Article 14C, which is entirely new, provides that the curricula and courses should incorporate the ethical dimensions of science and research. And then among the skills that should be promoted through education are intellectual integrity, sensitivity to conflict of interest, respect for ethical principles pertaining to research. This is also new. Now, why this emphasis on education in research integrity issues? The reason is that, as one expert in this area, David Resnick, has pointed out, among the various efforts aimed at promoting scientific integrity, the educational goal is the most important one, he says, because ethical conduct is not likely to occur without effective education. And the urgency of promoting education in this area has been recognized in the US since the 1980s, with the first cases of misconduct, the Baltimore case and others. And research institutions started to offer specific courses on scientific integrity. This trend arrived to Europe a little later, I would say in the 2000 or so. Now, I would say it's easy to say that integrity should be taught to science students, should be part of their curriculum of science. But the question is how to teach these issues. So what are the best ways of teaching this? How to ensure that such teaching is effective? And this, so it's not easy to do this, because this is not just about knowledge. It's not just about learning by heart some guidelines, repeating guidelines. It's more about, it's also knowledge, but it's also about promoting an ethical attitude. It's about motivating students, future researchers, to behave in a responsible way. And regarding this, I would like to briefly mention a project in which I'm involved. It's a European project precisely on the teaching of research integrity that started last year, which is coordinated by the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands. And I'm participating in this project from the University of Zurich, and our work package or task was consisted in conducting a survey with people teaching research integrity in Europe, in different countries. So we conducted this survey. We received responses from around 100 teachers, and we asked them about their courses, about the topics, about the teaching methods, etc. So we collected really interesting information, and we asked also some qualitative questions about the challenge they face when teaching these topics, about the blind spots that they observe in this teaching, and then about their experience, what works better. And I will mention that very quickly. Concerning the challenge they face, they mention the students' lack of motivation. They don't see this as important, or they think that they already know these things. The lack of time to cover all topics of research integrity, the little value that some academic institutions attach to research integrity courses, that class sizes are too big. Even the bad example given by supervisors and senior researchers is mentioned as a challenge. The non-mandatory nature of these courses. As blind spots, they mentioned that the teaching is sometimes too theoretical, only lectures, that it should have a more practical orientation and appeal to real-life examples to discuss, for instance, gray areas, which is called questionable research practices or sloppy science, which are not sufficiently discussed. The teaching should not start at the PhD level, but earlier. That the methodological requirements for good research are a little discussed. Then more generally, a culture of research integrity along the whole studies is missing, and the little use of online tools and videos. Finally, what works better? Many of them replied that the teaching method that seems to be more effective is the use of case studies combined with discussion. As someone said, we do not teach as such, but we can coordinate and facilitate discussions. So the idea is that the students themselves arrive at what should be done. This is called the Socratic method. Also, another thing that works is encouraging students to tell about their own personal experience with the dilemmas relating to research integrity. And some specific tools that work well also are role-playing, brainstorming in small groups, followed by discussion, and online tools and videos. So I come to my conclusions. I think the issues related to research integrity play a significant role in the new UNESCO recommendation. This is a novelty and innovation if compared to the previous document where this topic was virtually absent. Elements of research integrity are even regarded as constitutive of the notion of science, as I mentioned in Article 1, which includes the need of peer review in the definition of science. And among the topics related to research integrity that are included in this new recommendation are peer review, the ethical approval of research projects, the avoidance of undisclosed conflicts of interest, and the importance of teaching research integrity to science students. Thank you very much for your attention.